What is up, gang? Today is day 19 of Press Record 30, and today I want to talk about something that is referred to as the discarded image. When I say the discarded image, that is a reference to a book by C.S. Lewis, The Discarded Image, where the image that has been discarded is something like the medieval model. As you know from yesterday's video, today started a class on Dante's Inferno with Richard Rowland and Jonathan Pageau. And it made me rethink something I have thought about a lot previously, which is this idea of the discarded image and how what I see as something contributing to our meaning crisis is the fact that we have discarded an image of the cosmos that is arranged hierarchically, that gave man order. Say whatever you want about the medieval man and the medieval mindset. Obviously, we know more about the material workings of the universe now than we did then, but I dare say we have made little to no progress in terms of understanding the spiritual. In some ways, we may have even stepped backward. And I think at the foundation of the meaning crisis is a result of discarding this medieval image. I'm not making the case here that we should simply go back to medieval times in its totality. Not only do I think that unwise, it's impossible. What I am arguing for and thinking about instead is how do we reclaim some of the spiritual elements and orderliness of the medieval soul. That is what I want to talk about today. And in order to do that, I figured today would be just a good opportunity to introduce you guys to my Substack, my newsletter under the Lumenorean. I've mentioned it before in these videos, but in October of last year, I wrote a pretty long article and essay on the discarded image, and with the subtitle "From the Medieval Mind to the Meaning Crisis." And so I figured I would just use today's video to read that article. Spent a decent amount of time on it, and I think it does a pretty good job at capturing my thoughts on this subject coherently. So I'll just read it. And you can find this at noheisman.substack.com/p/on-the-discarded-image. Or if you just go to the Lumenorean and you search on the discarded image, this will show up. Here's the article. When the mid-1900s saw Nietzsche announce the death of God, C.S. Lewis said our world was one populated by men without chests. I'm gonna start over. When the mid-1900s saw Nietzsche announce the death of God, C.S. Lewis say our world was populated by men without chests, and Simone Weil point to our species as uprooted, there was a sense among great thinkers that something very vital had gone missing. That man, with his conquest of nature and his scientific hunger, quote, having eaten up everything else, ate himself up too. And where we go from that is a dark question, unquote. Of course, Nietzsche, Lewis, and Weil disagreed on what precisely that very vital thing gone missing was, and each was, in my view, right to an extent, as it was not any one thing in isolation, but a variety of things working together that conspired to create a cultural zeitgeist that swept modern man into a meaning crisis. To try and list all of the factors that so conspired is beyond the scope of this particular essay, but we can look at least one. The move away from the medieval view of the cosmos. The medieval view. Taking cues from classical writers like Plato in the Republic, Phaedrus and Timaeus, Virgil in the Aeneid, Cicero in Somnium Scipionis, and Lucan in Pharsalia, and early Christian fathers like St. Augustine, the medieval philosophers and poets, think Aquinas, Milton, Chaucer, Dante, painted a picture of the cosmos that sees the deepest desire of man fulfilled by a movement upward along a hierarchy. Sitting atop that hierarchy was the summum bonum, highest good, an unmoved mover, the highest good, the sun, source of all light and movement, known as God to many religions. At the bottom was earth and the men who inhabited it. The moon, for Cicero and the medievals, represented the boundary point where the temporal things passed into the eternal. In the mind of the medievals, as in Plato, the soul's deepest longing was to return to the top of that hierarchy because that's where we came from. This view of the cosmos diverges from most modern conceptions in at least a few ways. One is how what we call nature is viewed. For the medieval poets, nature was not everything, as the pantheist claims. Like everything else, nature was created. Quote, she was not God's highest, much less his only creature. She had her proper place below the moon. She had her appointed duties as God's vice-regent in that area, unquote. Another way the medieval view differed from the common modern conception is that there was a realm beyond space and time, a space where we humans, cannot explore, where things exist unchanging and in their ideal state. This is something like Plato's realm of the forms. To feel the effect of these divergent views, as Lewis counsels 3 times in the discarded image, we must walk under a night sky. His first mention of this exercise involves imagining ourselves at the bottom of a universe looking up rather than out. Quote, these facts are in themselves curiosities of mediocre interest. They become valuable only insofar as they enable us to enter more fully into the consciousness of our ancestors by realizing how such a universe must have affected those who believed in it. The recipe for such a realization is not the study of books. You must go out on a starry night and walk about for half an hour trying to see the sky in terms of the old cosmology. Remember that you now have an absolute up and down. The earth really is the center, really the lowest place. Movement to it from whatever direction is downward movement. As a modern, you located the stars at the great distance. For distance, you must now substitute that very special and far less abstract sort of distance which we call height. Height, which speaks immediately to our muscles and nerves. The medieval model is vertiginous, meaning it goes vertical. To look out at the night sky with modern eyes is like looking over a sea that fades away into mist, or looking about one in a trackless forest, trees forever and no horizon. To look up at the towering medieval universe is much more like looking at a great building. The second time Lewis advocates for a starry walk, he emphasizes a shift from seeing a space as vast emptiness to seeing it as bursting with divinity, where we moderns imagine the heavenly bodies move, quote, in a pitch black and dead cold vacuity of terrifying silence, end quote. The medieval saw the sun illuminate the entire cosmos and heard its harmony. Quote, if the reader cares to repeat the experiment already suggested of a nocturnal walk with the medieval astronomy in mind, he will easily feel the effect of the medieval view. The silence, which frightened Pascal, was, according to the medieval model, wholly illusory, and the sky looks black only because we are seeing it through the dark glass of our own shadow. You must conceive yourself looking up at a world lighted, warmed, and resonant with music. The third and final time that Lewis suggests a starlight walk, he encourages the wanderer to see themselves as looking in rather than out. I can hardly hope that I shall persuade the reader to yet a third experimental walk by starlight, but perhaps without actually taking the walk, he can now improve his picture of that old universe by adding such finishing touches as this section suggested. Whatever else a modern feels when he looks at the night sky, he certainly feels that he is looking out. Like one looking out from a saloon entrance onto the dark Atlantic, or from a lighted porch upon a dark and lonely moors. But if you accepted the medieval model, you would feel like one looking in. The earth is outside the city wall. When the sun is up, he dazzles us, and we cannot see inside. Darkness, our own darkness, draws the veil, and we catch a glimpse of the high palms within. The mind runs up to heaven, by heaven, to him who is really the center. To your senses, the circumference of all. The quarry whom all these untiring huntsmen pursue. The candle to whom all these moths move, yet are not burned. With our view of the medieval mind now in sight, we can see how the world was an ordered one. Heaven was at top, earth was at bottom, and life was a moving up and down a ladder. Quote, Medieval man was not a dreamer nor a wanderer. He was an organizer, a codifier, a builder of systems. He wanted a place for everything and everything in the right place. Distinction, definition, tabulation were his delight. Though full of turbulent activities, he was equally full of the impulse to formalize them. War was, in intention, formalized by the art of heraldry and the rules of chivalry. Sexual passion, in intention, by an elaborate code of love. There was nothing which medieval people liked better or did better than sorting and tidying up. In this medieval image, quote, everything links up with everything else at one, not in flat equality, but a hierarchical ladder. When the Enlightenment discoveries of Copernicus, Galileo, Newton, and others showed the universe was heliocentric, gravity made things fall, and things in space changed like everything on Earth, the world saw these discoveries as sufficient to upend the medieval model of the cosmos. What they didn't see coming, however, was how much of humanity was doomed to drift when detached from its high star. Without it, there is no up and there is no down. There is no better to move toward and no worse to move from. When the medieval model is discarded entirely, the world becomes flat and dull without meaning or movement toward anywhere worth going. After completing Lewis's prescribed exercises, we are left to wonder whether we have been misled. Maybe the Dark Ages were not so dark and the Enlightenment not so light as the titles would have us believe. Maybe ours is the age that is truly dark, and that is the reason we now find ourselves caught neck deep in the quicksand of a meaning crisis, where people have been uprooted, disconnected from themselves, each other, the world, and from an optimistic future. Anxiety disorders, depression, and despair and suicide are on the rise across the globe. It has us re-ask the question. Maybe the medievals were on to something after all. That's it for today's video. I hope you liked the article. If you liked that essay, you can find that essay and more like it on my Substack. You can search the Lumenorean, and you can go from there. That's enough for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, peace.